Hello everybody, it's Murray here and welcome back to my channel M Stewart Paintings. On today's acrylic painting tutorial we're going to paint this gorgeous couple sitting in front of an ocean beach. I'm going to teach you how to easily blend colours and how to paint clouds very easily. I'm also going to teach you how to mix dark colours to create a deep ocean and lighter blues and turquoises to create shallow water and waves, and what brushes I use to do that. I'm also going to teach you how to paint people realistically, and again use colour to create shade and highlights to make them look like they're sitting in the sun or in the shade, and we can paint this step by step together. So let's get into it. So a nice easy tutorial today. You're going to need the following colours. They are titanium white, cad yellow, cad orange light, cad red, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, iris purple, Payne's grey, raw umber brown and ivory black. Now I've got a raw sienna stained canvas that I've used raw sienna to create an outline of a couple and an ocean beach. I've used chalk in the distance just because we're going to use pastel colours and I don't want to have a horrible dark outline for putting a nice blue sky. But in the foreground where we're going to have waves and things, that outline is quite helpful just to plot out the painting. So if you'd like to pause the video and copy the outline, feel free to do so. And what we'll do, like always, we'll start off in the distance and we'll paint the sky first. So for the sky, if you're painting a nice blue sky, you always want the horizon to be lighter where it meets the ocean than higher up into the sky. So what we're going to do to create that impression, we're going to get some cerulean blue, which is nice and turquoise, a tiny bit of cobalt blue, a dot of purple, and lots of white to make it very pastel. So we're going to make this very nice pastel light blue. And at the ocean, just where that line of chalk is, we're going to go down to that line and create a nice pastel blue. I'm just going to add a little bit more white. We want it very pastel. And what we're going to do, we're just going to have where the ocean and the sky meets, we're going to just have this lovely light blue. And that's going to be our horizon. Now, as the sky moves up, it gets a shade darker and it gets this nice blue effect. So what we're going to do for that, we're going to mix a darker colour, but using the same colours. So we're just going to get less white, more cerulean blue, a little bit of cobalt blue, which makes it more cooler. So we're going to mix the two, tiny bit of purple and just a dot of brown and just less white now. So the blue, the colour blue, should be a lot cooler and darker. So there we go. I'm just going to add a tiny bit more cerulean blue into the mix. And we should create a nice pastel blue that's just a hint darker. And because it's got a little bit of purple, a bit more cobalt blue, which is a lot cooler, and a hint of that brown, it should look like it's darker. And what it does by having a dark, cooler blue, it will frame the painting and make it look like the sky is fading off into the distance. So what we're going to do, we're just going to layer the paint on. And if you have a hairdryer, you can dry your work. And if you've got any streaks like me where the paint hasn't taken, you can just go over it and just make your work a bit more vibrant. Acrylics, because they're water based, sometimes when you lay a first coat of paint, they can look quite streaky. You can have some of your brush marks in them and they can just look a bit unpolished. So if you want to make your work and you want to learn blending and just make it look a bit more professional and realistic, by just where you're painting large areas such as the sky, if you just give it 2 coats of paint, you can get any brush marks out and you can blend a lot easier. So all I'm doing, I'm just making sure I've got that lovely light blue, none of that horrible raw sienna canvas is shining through. And then I'm just getting some of the darker blue. Mine's dried. That is unfortunately a bit of a pain with acrylics because they dry very quickly. So I'm just mixing it up again. So it was just white, a little bit more cobalt blue, still some cerulean blue, and a dot of purple to make it nice and cool. And all we're going to do, as we join the two colours together, we're just going to create X shapes. So I'm just going to go right up to the top first. And I'm just going to make my painting look much more vibrant. and nice and polished. And then as we come down into the lighter shade, I'm just going to get a bit more of that darker blue and just put it in the corner here just to make it all nice. But as I join the two colours up, I'm just going to create X shapes with my brush. So if I just get the lighter shade again, because we've got a big jump in colour, so I'm just going to mix some of that up again. So it's cerulean blue and white, a little bit of cobalt blue, but not as much. Loads of white. There we go. So we've got this lovely pastel colour. Look, if we go over the top and just gently create X shapes with our brush. Look, X, back and forth, back and forth. We can blend the colours while they're still damp. So by just going up into the painting and just creating these X shapes, we've got this lovely transition from the nice light horizon into the darker blue that frames our corners. So there we go, really, really easy. And then we're going to get that colour. I'm just going to wipe away a lot of the paint and I'm going to start painting clouds with it. So I've got a blender brush, which is just a big chunky round-headed brush that's really, really soft bristles. And it's completely dry. It's very much like a makeup brush, what ladies use to put on blusher and stuff on their faces. So it's very, very soft and nice to touch. And all I'm doing, I'm just getting some of the lighter horizon colour. And now we've laid that darker blue, I'm pushing this nice soft bristle brush against my canvas and I'm just making all these wispy clouds. And what it looks like the clouds are coming out from the horizon and creating a nice realistic cloud effect. So it's really, really easy. If you find your clouds are smudging a little bit with the background sky, you can always dry your work and do this over the top on a dry canvas if you find that easier. But all I'm doing, I'm just blending it slightly to the previous colour. I'm going to get some white now. I'm just going to wipe off most of the paint, just have a hint of white. And I'm just going to put some highlights. Now acrylics, as I say, because they're water based, they pick up a lot of the colour that's underneath. And because it's really dark and gloomy in London, it's going to look a bit blue on your screens. But when I zoom out, you can see it will look very nice and realistic. But all I'm doing, I'm just adding a tiny bit of white. I'm going to have the light coming from the right hand side. So on the right of all these clouds, I'm just giving them a highlight. So I didn't want to use just pure white because that would make it look cartoony. By using the horizon colour, we can create this realism, and then by just having bits with a little bit more hint of white, we can make them look like they're in the sunlight. Like the sun is coming from the right hand side and it's shining down on some of these clouds. And if you want to create thicker clouds, you just add thicker paint. And if you want to make them more wispy and just very subtle, just add less paint. So look, if I get lots of paint, and I push down really hard. Look, big, thick, big clouds. Look at that. Because I've got lots of paint and I'm giving it some wellies, we would say in Britain. Giving it some power. So I'm pushing down hard. But if I want to make it really soft and blend it, look, I just ease up on the pressure. And I just barely touch the canvas. So look, if I want big, harsh clouds, I just push hard. Excuse the focus. I think it's focusing on my hand. And then if I want to just blend it and make them look like they're fading off into the distance, I just gently push it against the canvas, hardly giving any bits. And if it dries and it looks a bit flat because it's absorbed some of that paint, look, you can just go over the top, just like we did with the background sky, and give it a second coat of paint, especially with the highlights, and it will make it a little bit more vibrant. So don't be afraid to go over your work twice. I know a lot with tutorials they skip stages, but if you want to have the really nice realistic effect, by just drying your work with a hairdryer, and then if you just go over the top in certain areas where that blue has absorbed some of the darker blue underneath, it's just dried a bit flat. So if you want to make it more 3D, by just going over the top with a little bit more white, we can just make them nice and realistic. Now I've used chalk to measure a straight horizon, and I've got some painting tape. Please make sure your painting is dry if you've used a hairdryer before you apply the tape, and then you won't rip off half of your background sky when you remove the tape. And the great thing about chalk is you can measure things and it doesn't leave a horrible mark. So it's really, really good rather than using a pencil. And what we're going to do now, we're going to paint a flat ocean. We're going to go right up to this tape and we're going to use darker blues to insinuate a deep, dark ocean in the distance. And then we're going to use more turquoise as we come towards the couple and the beach to create shallow water. So we're going to use cobalt blue, which is nice and dark. And we're going to add a little bit of cerulean blue to the mix. So we're going to create a royal blue. We're going to add a tiny bit of turquoise. And a little bit of brown. So a tiny bit of turquoise and a little bit of brown. Just to suck a bit of the colour out. We're going to add some white so it's not so harsh. And I'm going to use a flat-headed brush. And what we're going to do, we're going to go right up to the edge of the paint to get a nice straight line. And then we can paint a nice, straight, flat ocean horizon. So if you imagine the ocean off into the distance is incredibly deep. So by using darker blues, we can create the distance that is really far away. So a bit like our sky where we've got the lighter horizon, we're trying to make it look like it's fading off into the distance. Now a really cool thing about that colour is we can use it, now we've got an outline, we could use that to outline all our waves. Because waves aren't brown, so we can go over our raw sienna with some of this cool blue. And this could be the colour for all the waves, all the wash that is in the shade. Picking up some of that sky colour. So using these cool blues and just going over our outline, we can just give our waves a more realistic colour. And don't worry if a little bit of that raw sienna brown shines through. It actually looks quite realistic because you will have some harsh shadows. So I'm just using this colour just to use a flat brush. A flat brush is really easy, look, to create straight lines. So it makes your life a hell of a lot easier because the brush is flat. So by using it, you can create nice straight waves. Some of the waves we want bobbly because water is bobbly. So we've got this nice dark colour and we're just going to go right up to the tape to make sure it's nice and straight. So when we remove it, we've got a lovely straight line. Now we're going to add some turquoise to the mix. So turquoise creates like a tropical water effect. And because we've got a hint of that blue still in it, we're just getting more shallower in the water as it comes towards the couple. So we're going from this dark, far off, deep ocean to more shallow water, and we're just blending the two colours together. And then we're going to get some more turquoise, and we're going to add some white to the mix, and we're going to create an even more shallower colour. So as the water comes towards the beach, we've gone from really dark to medium to light. So as we come towards the beach, the water's that gorgeous turquoise colour when you get shallow tropical water. So don't worry if you paint over their heads, we can put it all back later. The great thing about using a dark colour to outline is you'll still shine through. So we still have a rough colour. And I'm just going to mix a little bit of the sky colour in with that mix. And I'm just going to come down. So it's just the horizon colour with a hint of turquoise. So just a little bit more blue to look like the sky. So as that water is coming into the shore, it's getting more shallow. It's getting more see-through. It's going to look like a mirror of the sky, you see. So we've got this big jump between the dark and the light. So we're going to just blend the middle. So do you remember what I've been saying about the three little bears? Think of not too hot, not too cool, something in between. We want to go from really dark cool blues to much more shallower, warmer tones. So by using some of this turquoise in the middle here, we can try to blend the colours so there's not so much of a jump between the really harsh, far off dark blue, our deep ocean, and our shallows. So I'm just using turquoise here in the middle, and I'm just using the three tones that we've mixed, and I'm doing our X shapes just to gently blend it. So the same trick like we did with the sky, we're just gently bridging these colours together, and it should trick the eyes and look like it's getting more shallow as it comes towards the viewer. So we're going to do the same. I'm just going to clean my brush, and I'm just going to do the same here with this turquoise. I'm just going to go from turquoise to the lighter blue. It's really subtle, and it should look like a nice transition from deep water to shallow water. Hooray! Just neaten up that side. There we go. So there we go. So now we're zoomed out. That looks really nice and realistic. And we've got our lovely clouds that look like they're fading off into the distance. So just before we remove our tape, we're going to mix some of the horizon colour again. So it was loads of white, some cobalt blue, but mainly cerulean blue, and lots of white. And we're just going to make that lovely pastel horizon colour. I think there was a dot of purple in it, but I forgot to do it this time, but never mind. And all we're going to do is just here where you have like the waves peel back, it leaves wet sand. We're just going to create a mirror of the sky. So what we're going to do, we're just going to paint it the same colour of the sky, just so it looks like that lovely blue sky is reflecting down onto that wet sand. So again, don't worry if you go over your outline of your people. We just want to block her in. But now we're starting to move ahead in the painting. Can you see we haven't really done any detail? We've just been doing blending, but can you see how realistic it's starting to look already? And it's all through colour. So this is what I keep trying to teach you in all the tutorials. Learn how to mix colours. Use the brushes that I keep recommending, because they'll make your life so much easier. And then once you start getting better at your drawing and having more confidence, your work will look much more realistic. But you can really get a good solid foundation from just using the realistic colours. So there we go. And as I say, if you have any of the raw sienna shining through, just give it a second coat. I always paint my canvas raw sienna just for that reason, so I can see where I'm missing areas. So I'm going to get some brown, some raw umber brown, and some white. I'm going to add a little bit of cerulean blue just to make it sort of browny silver colour, and a tiny bit of purple just to make it cooler. And I'm just going to create a colour for the sand. So again, you have wet sand, and you get this sort of dark colour at the edges. I'm just going to create that. So mix in some raw umber. Raw umber is not as harsh, it's not as red as burnt umber. It's more realistic. So raw umber you can use. If you haven't got raw umber, you can add a little bit of purple or a little bit of cobalt blue to your brown just to make it cooler. And then as the sand is a bit warmer, we're going to add some purple and some yellow and some brown together. So purple, yellow and brown, a hint of orange just to make it a bit warmer, and some white. So purple, yellow, brown and a hint of orange and lots of white. And we're just going to make a sort of dark grey, a warm grey. And we're just going to paint in the beach. So what we're doing, we're just gently blending that into the sky colour, because if you imagine the sand and the ocean are mixing together now. So as it comes onto the beach, you get a little bit of sand colour, but you also get a little bit of the sky reflecting. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use that colour and I'm just going to block in the bottom of the painting. So it's this nice warm grey. And what we can use that as is a shadow colour before we put the highlights over the top. Because it's nice and grey, and acrylics always dry a little bit darker. It should dry nice and dark. And then where we want a little bit of definition between the beach and the ocean, we're going to get lots of white. We're going to add some yellow now. So if you've noticed, I've got all my hot colours on the left and all my darker, cooler colours on the right. So a little bit of orange just to warm her up even more. So lots and lots of white, a hint of yellow and a dot of orange. And then I'm going to use that sharp edge of my brush and I'm just going to create little sort of zigzags. And I'm going to leave little bits of the gaps of the darker colour we just laid. And especially in the corners, because I want to sign it in my left hand corner. And I'm just going to have now bits of the beach that's getting some sunlight. But by leaving little tiny gaps in the darker grey underneath, it's looking like I've created texture. See how that works? Just by leaving little gaps. Looks like little bubbles in the sand. There we go. And then because that colour's a little bit brighter and warmer, there's just now a bit of definition between... Oops, I've missed a bit in the middle. Let's put some sand here. There's a bit of definition now between the ocean and the sand. So if we remove our tape, we should have a lovely straight horizon. If you were like me and you didn't paint all the way down to your horizon, you can see on your canvas the raw sienna will show up. Look, that's what's great about using a darker colour rather than white. You can see where you've missed. And then all you have to do is just mix a little bit of horizon colour and just put it back in. So there's no problem you can't fix. And then while I've got the horizon colour, I'm going to swap to a smaller brush and I'm just going to create sort of bubbles, and this is going to be a crashing wave coming towards the beach. So all I'm using is that horizon colour, same colour we use for the clouds. So it was lots and lots of white, cerulean blue and a tiny bit of cobalt blue and a tiny hint of purple. And all I'm doing, I'm just pushing against the canvas and just making it deliberately bobbly to look like a wave coming towards the shore. So it's still got a hint of this blue in it. It's not all white. So again, the colours create the realism. And by just making it all bobbly, it looks like foam. It looks like a big wave coming towards the shore. Here we go. And then let's do the same underneath. This could be a little wave that's coming in. So this is so easy. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. So don't forget to tag me at mstuartpaintings with your versions of the tutorials. I love seeing everyone's work. Some of the ones people send to me are incredible. They look just like mine, so I'm really, really proud. So please, if you're painting my tutorials at home, please tag me on Instagram and Facebook and show them off, and I can see them and then I can shout them out on my Instagram for you. So there we go. And then we're just going to get some of that warm sand colour. And again, we're just going to give it a second coat of paint just to bring some of that vibrancy out. So look how much more yellow and bright that looks from giving it a second coat of paint. And because the sunlight is coming from the right, remember, we're just going to have a nice bit of sun coming from this right hand side. We're going to leave that left hand corner nice and dark because I'm going to sign it there. So I need a dark colour for my signature to stand out against. But on this right side, I want to make it nice and bright. So it looks like it's getting bleached in the sunlight. And don't forget to do the middle this time. There we go. Cool. Okay, so this is all the background is pretty much done. We can always add a little bit of detail later if we want to, but we're going to work now on our couple. So it's Valentine's Day coming up, and I thought, look, why not let's paint a nice couple. So I'm going to get some raw umber brown, and I'm just going to, on the left-hand side, I'm just going to always make it darker than the right, because the left-hand side is going to be in the shade, and the right-hand side is going to be in the sunlight. So I'm just adding a bit more paint. I think my brush had a bit of the blue on it still. So I'm just adding more brown so it's nice and harsh. And let's do the dude's head. Now you can at home for Valentine's Day, I thought this could be a nice thing for Valentine's Day, you could paint yourself and your partner if you wanted to. I've just chose two people. This guy is obviously not me because he's got hair. But you can always make these two people, you and your partner, and you could give this as a gift. So you don't have to copy exactly my one. So what I'm doing, I'm using brown just to create a harsh shadow. So brown rather than black is a bit more forgiving. If you think black is a bit overwhelming, just like white, where black is really, really, really dark and white is really, really super bright. By using brown, we can have this harsh outline, but it's just not as overbearing as black. So we're going to use this nice raw umber. As I say, raw umber is not as red as, say, burnt umber or raw sienna that we've got here. So it just looks cooler. It looks more natural. So what I'm doing on his bum here, I'm just making the shadow, all the things on the left, nice and dark. Because if the light's coming from the right, we want all the shadows on the left. So I'm just adding a little bit of purple to the raw umber. And purple's really good for creating a cool grey. So by adding some purple and some raw umber together, if your purple is incredibly bright, you can always add a tiny bit of cobalt blue, and that will cool it down. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to create a little shadow, and we can have some bubbles on the beach. So this can just be some like bits and bobs where they've walked over, I guess. Some little divots in the sand. So all I'm doing, just add a little bit of detail with that cool grey. We're not going to go super detailed because I want this tutorial to be nice and easy for everyone at home. But just creating all these little impressions, and again with the colours, once we step back, it will look incredibly realistic. So we're going to get some of the cerulean blue and some cobalt blue, mix that together. I'm going to add a little bit of brown, and I'm going to kind of try and make a denim colour, like the colour of jeans. So I'm adding a little bit of brown. I think that's too vibrant, so let's add more brown. So as I say, brown sucks colour out. Let's add a little bit purple just to make it a bit grey. There we go, that's better. So if you ever get a vibrant colour and it doesn't look too realistic, add a bit of raw umber brown to it, and it will make it look more matte, more bland. And this is sort of the colour of denim. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of white to a patch, and this could be the bit in the sun. So where her bum's in the shade, her kneecap here will be sitting getting all that sunlight. So again, by just tricking your eyes with colour, it just looks like her knee is in the sun. It's so easy. So what we're doing, we're just using more. She could have a denim dress, I guess, why not? So the more you're in the sun, we're just going to have lighter shades. And the more you're in the shade, we're just going to have cooler shades. And then let's use the same colour on his shirt, why not? So let's use that sort of lighter blue here in the middle. There we go. Let's use the darker bit on the left. So the same colour as on the lady's dress, we're just using on his shirt here. And then we'll just use the lighter colour. Let's make it even lighter. Let's make it really light, just by adding more white. So his shoulder's really in the sunlight, and his upper back, I guess. So I'm just blending the two areas in his collar. So it's almost like the colour of the horizon. And while it's wet, look, I'm just blending the two colours together. So I'm just going back and forth, just so it looks like it's merging. You can always get a bit of the darker colour. Just clean my brush. So what we're going to do, we're going to mix a colour. It's just off screen. You can see it in about 20 seconds when I zoom out. All it is purple and cad red. So purple and cad red. And we're just going to make a dark purple here on the left hand side. And this could be her sort of tank top. So purple and cad red. And if I clean my brush again, there we go. So that was the colour. And all we're going to do is add a tiny bit more red and lots of white to the mix to make a pastel version. So we've got a dark version on the left, and we've again got a lighter version on the right. So where you've got that harsh colour on one side, you've got the lighter colour on the other side. And then all we're going to do, we're going to take our raw umber brown, and we're just going to put our harsh shadow back in. So nice and dark, just blend it into that purple. And the same here on her dress. There we go. And let's do the same here with his shirt. We'll just put that harsh brown back in, just really gently blending it while the paint is wet. And same on his left shoulder, just to make it look really in the shade. And put his collar back. Could be wearing a polo shirt or something like that, why not? Put his arm back in here. And his bum. Let's use Payne's Grey. Now Payne's Grey is just basically cobalt blue and black and a tiny bit of brown. So if you don't have Payne's Grey, if you just get some cobalt blue, add a tiny dot of black and some raw umber brown, you should get this nice dark blue. And he can be wearing some dark jeans, why not? So I'm just going to make his bum darker, and I'm just going to add some white. Excuse me for being so zoomed in, I've just realised that where I'm zoomed in to show you. But all I've done the same technique. I've just added white to the mix just for his knee. So just like we did with the lady, and the same with the tank top and his shirt, I'm just adding more white to the mix for his knee. And then I'm just going back to the original colour, the darker blue, and look, I'm just mixing the two areas together now. So as I say, not too hot, not too warm, I'm just bridging the colours together. So there we go. So it looks like his little top of his knees in the sunlight, and his back here is nice and dark. And then once you're happy with it, we're going to mix some skin colour. So we're going to mix two colours for the skin colour. We're going to make a darker shade and a lighter shade. So I'm just going to show you how to do that. So you just get plenty of white for either shade. So we're going to make the dark one at the top and the lighter one at the bottom here. So we're just going to get loads and loads of titanium white. For the lighter one, we're just going to add a little bit of yellow and a tiny bit of orange. So mainly white with a tiny bit of yellow and a tiny bit of orange. And we should get a nice highlight colour. And then for the darker tone, we're just going to add some yellow to the white, some orange, and a little bit of purple to make it more grey, and a tiny bit of brown. So white, yellow, orange, purple and brown. And we should have a nice darker shade. Still got loads of white in it. And then we've got a lighter shade at the bottom for highlights. So dark shade for the shade, lighter shade for the highlights. So I'm going to take the lighter shade of the colours we mixed, and I'm just going to block her arm in here. As I say, if you want to, you can always make it you and your partner. So if you have a different shade of skin or a different colour hair or a different hairstyle, you can always change this. But I'm just going to use the lighter shade just to block them in. So let's give him some coloured elbows so he's not so pasty. And we better do his neck because his neck's a bit blue from that wave. And he's got no ears, so let's give him some ears. So he can have big ears, why not? And then we're going to get some of the darker shade that we mixed, and we're just going to colour in a little bit of highlights on her right side of her hair. So I'm just going to use that colour to block in the right side of her hair, just for a bit of an underpainting. And I'm going to swap back to my raw umber brown, and I'm just going to leave a little bit of that highlight shining through, but I'm just going to put the shadow back on, and it should look like it's a bit texturized. So if I put this harsh shadow back in and just leave a little bit on the right, it should look like her hair is glistening in the sun, hopefully. And then all I'm doing, I'm just adding a little bit of yellow and white, just yellow and white, so cad yellow and lots of white, just on the tips on the right hand side. So that shoulder is getting lots of sunlight. So by just using some cad yellow and loads of white, I can just make a little sort of shiny highlight just on her right hand shoulder here. And a tiny bit on her hair. So I'm just going to put some shimmer again on her hair. But as you can see, look, white is very cartoony. So look, if I just left it like this, if I just left it like that, that looks really cartoony. It's too much of a jump between the really darks and the bright white. That's what I was saying earlier about how it's really overwhelming. So by just blending it in to the brown, you can just make it look a bit more realistic. So we only want a hint of it. I'm just putting some of that dark raw umber back in. So it should look like it's nice and dark one side and nice and highlighted on the other side. Awesome. And then what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put in her sort of strap here with this raw umber. I'm just trying to refine everything using a fine liner. So I'm just taking my time. Now we've got everything blocked in, I'm just starting to put some of the detail on. So I'm starting to put some of the shadows back in. You can start putting texture in, so where he's got like creases in his clothes, little gaps between the denim and his polo shirt, creases in his jeans. You could always add pockets or whatever you wanted to. So we're just giving a little bit of detail now. Let's make this shoulder a lot harsher. This is going to be not getting as much sunlight. Let's make the left hand side of his head a bit darker and his hairline a bit neater. Let's get some of the darker skin tone and just create a bit of a shadow under his hair and on the left hand side of his neck. And then on his left arm, let's make that more in the shade. And let's get that darker skin tone and do the same to the lady to all be symmetrical. So let's make her left shoulder and her left arm in the shade. So can you see now how it's tricking your eye? Can you see that her left arm's in the shade and her right arm's in the sunlight? So it looks really realistic. So let's make the bottom left here of this arm look like it's a bit more in the shade. And the same on her shoulder here where her hair's coming down. So again, there's not much detail. It's all in the colours. Let's do the same here on his inner arm, or his polo shirt's coming down, his sleeve. And let's give a tiny bit of that hint of that orange on her head, just to create a little bit of highlight. And the same on his head. Let's give him a little bit of texture on his head. There we go. And if we zoom out, that's starting to look really realistic. Let's get some cad red. Let's put her handbag in, why not? This could be her handbag that she's brought to the beach. So again, look, red is really, really bright. So let's add a bit of purple to the mix and blue. So let's add some brown. And let's give it a bit of a harsher shadow. So brown and purple are fantastic for cooling vibrant colours down. So if you've got something like that cad red, which is really overwhelming, add a little bit of blues and browns, even greys, purples, anything like that. Look, create cool tones. So I've mixed brown, Payne's grey, and some purple. And all I'm doing, I'm just making that shadow a little bit harsher. Nice and cool around her hand and her handbag. There we go. And I'm just going to get some white, and I'm just going to put some highlights on our wave. So I'm just going to make a little bit of a sparkle on some of these waves. Again, just like we did with the clouds, by adding a tiny bit of white with a fine liner. I could just add some texture just to make my water look more realistic. And again, look, we could just make this a little bit more pastel while it's drying. I think that red is a bit overwhelming. So by stepping back from your work and just taking a fresh eye of it, you can really see where you have to work areas. So this wave, by just making some little white highlights on the top edge, it just looks like the sunlight shining down. And I'm leaving tiny gaps for that sort of pastel blue to still shine through, to give it some texture. So let's do the same on just above his head. And then he stands out a little bit more now. And let's do some on the bottom wave, just as a bit of definition between the wet sand and the ocean. But if you think we're going to paint, by the time this video is over, you've painted a really realistic painting in less than an hour, which is incredible. And you're learning it all for free. Think of that. So YouTube is fantastic. If you want to learn and get better at stuff, YouTube is the place to be. So there we go. So our ocean is looking great. You can, as it say, look, just by adding more white to areas, because that sunlight is coming from the right. I'm just adding some pure titanium white on some of my clouds. I'm using my clean finger to smear it. Hopefully it hasn't got paint this week, and I'm not going to smear horrible colour into the canvas. But as I say, look, if you want to think where the light is coming from, so all on the right, I'm just making it a little bit more vibrant, a bit brighter with that white. You can add some little breakaway clouds to give it a bit of added detail. And the same here, I'm just using some of that sand colour we mixed, which was cad yellow, tiny dot of orange and lots of white, just to put again some highlights on the right hand side, just so it looks like it's sparkling in the sunlight. And just on her shoulder again, because it's dried a bit flat, some white and cad yellow. So let's make her shoulder and her hair just sparkle a little bit. So all the finishing touches, As I keep saying to you on all the videos, they're the things that create the realism. So don't be afraid to step back from your work and just spend 10 minutes just fixing things, adding tiny little details. So I'm just putting a little bit of sand in between her waist and her elbow, just peeking through, just making her arm look a bit more realistic by painting in some of the background. And let's put his ears a bit more realistic. They were a bit big the first time. So I'm just making the right hand side of his neck a little bit brighter. And he can have a nice shimmer on his right hand side using that white and yellow. And then if I get some of the sky colour, which was white, cerulean blue and tiny bit of cobalt blue and a dot of purple, I'm just going to put a highlight of the sky colour just coming down on the edge of his back and his shoulder here to make that look like it's in the sunlight. And I'm just going to give her bum a bit of a darker outline and her knee. So as I say, I'm just using a fine liner, just putting the finishing details on. But none of the finishing details would look any good without all the basic blending and the colours. The finishing details are just the candle on top of the cake, so to speak. But if you look at his things like his left arm, her left shoulder compared to her right shoulder, and his neck, that's what's creating the realism, and his hair, things like that, all these hots and colds. So I'm just going to mix some cerulean blue and some cobalt blue and a tiny bit of brown, a little bit of white just to make it a little bit pastel, and I'm just going to put some waves in the background, really subtle, you can barely see them, just using my flat brush. So again, just another little added bit of detail. It's just really subtle. All I'm doing is just doing some straight lines across the canvas to create the illusion of waves, to make my ocean look a bit more realistic. And you could do the exact same trick with some turquoise. So I'm just going to add some turquoise to the mix. So let's make it more turquoisey. A little bit of white just because it's coming into the shallows. Plenty of turquoise. And the same here. So now we've got it mixed. Just in this middle bit we can just put some little divots to create a little bit of wash in this water. There we go. And then I'm just going to get some white, and I'm just going to have a little bit of the clouds reflecting in this wet sand. So I'm just going to have a little bit of the clouds shimmering in the wet sand. And then let's have a little bit of a shimmer just here, just on the left, why not? So tiny bit of shimmer here, and I think she's pretty much done. So I've signed her in the bottom left hand corner. So you've learnt how to paint a nice blended sky, how to paint clouds in acrylic paints. We've got this lovely horizon going into a darker sky with the lovely wispy clouds that push back. We've got our deep ocean that you've learned how to do in shallow water as we come towards the beach. And we've got the lovely light coming from the right. And we've got these highlights on not only the sand and the water, but on the people itself. You've learned how to do skin colour and clothes and texturize it to create realism. So a lovely romantic picture of a couple on a beach. And as I say, Valentine's Day is coming up in a month. If you would like to paint you and your partner and give it as a gift, you're very welcome to. My name is Murray. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you so much everyone for supporting the channel, and don't forget to tag me at mstuartpaintings with your versions of these fantastic tutorials. So have a great weekend everyone, and see you soon. Take care. Bye.